My name is James. I'm 38 years old. For a long time, I thought I understood what it meant to live. I worked hard, achieved things, traveled, enjoyed parties, indulged in every pleasure that money and freedom could offer. I did everything they told me was the path to happiness, and for a while, it even seemed like it was. But there was always this uncomfortable feeling deep inside, a kind of silent emptiness that none of those experiences could ever fill. Until one day, with no logical explanation, I decided to walk away from it all. I got in my car, drove for hours to a mountainous region, and checked into a remote inn. I wanted silence. That night, alone in the room, with no internet signal, I lay on the bed, turned off the light, and stared at the ceiling. I'm not sure if I fell asleep or entered some other state, but suddenly, something happened. The room vanished. Oh, everything vanished. I found myself in an infinite space completely filled with golden light, warm and welcoming. There was no floor, no walls, no sky. Just that light, which seemed to have a consciousness of its own. And then, I felt the presence. It was something so intense, so absolute, that I knew without a doubt I was standing before God. In that moment, my whole being trembled, but it wasn't fear. It was reverence, a sense of smallness in front of something infinitely greater. And then, I heard, it wasn't a voice like the one I'm using now to tell this. It was a kind of direct communication that passed through my mind, my soul, everything. God called me by name. He said, James. And in that instant, I knew. He heard me. He had always heard me. I didn't have to say anything. I just thought, or rather, I felt. I can't take it anymore. I don't know who I am. I have everything, but I feel empty. And then God said to me, do you want to understand what's happening to you? I could only agree, mentally. Then, he continued, you got lost, James. Lost in the illusion of lust and attachment. At that moment, hearing those words was like a mirror being placed in front of me. God showed me images of my own life. I saw myself at parties, surrounded by people, by bodies, by drinks, by everything I had always pursued. And that, deep down, had never fulfilled me. And then God said, you tried to numb yourself through the senses. You thought pleasure could fill what only meaning can. That hit me deeply. He went on, lust is a deception, James. It's an endless craving. You think you want pleasure, but what you really want is to feel alive. But you confused excitement with fulfillment. As he said this, I saw more images. Me, after the parties, lying alone, staring at the ceiling, with that same emptiness that had followed me for years. And then God said, see, you never felt satisfied because lust never satisfies. It only feeds the absence. It masks the pain. At that moment, I started to cry, but not with physical tears, because I didn't even know if I had a body there. It was my soul, crying, as if it were finally seeing the raw truth for the first time. And God said, you were looking for love, looking for acceptance, but you chose the fastest, most superficial path. You wanted the body, but rejected the soul. I felt a deep sorrow, like someone who realizes they've spent years chasing something that could never bring what they truly longed for. Then God said, but don't blame yourself. You only did what everyone does when they don't know who they are. You tried to fill the void with what was within reach, but now it's time to be free. And I asked, not with words, but with my soul, how? And God answered, let go of the need to possess and simply embrace being. Those words kept echoing inside me. Let go of the need to possess and simply embrace being. In that moment, a profound silence settled in. not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of fullness. And then God said, "But lust isn't the only thing that holds you, James. I want to show you another prison." Suddenly, the light around me changed tone. It became softer, more translucent, and God showed me new images. My cars, my apartment, my expensive watches, the numbers in my bank account, the contracts, everything I had achieved and secretly believed defined me. Then he said, "You believed you were what you owned, but you forgot who you are." At that moment, I felt a deep shame, as if I were naked, without any of those things, without my status symbols, just me. And God continued, "Attachment is an invisible prison, James. You think you're accumulating things to protect yourself, to feel safe. But the more you accumulate, the more you're trapped." And I saw images of myself, anxious, stressed, afraid of losing what I had achieved, always vigilant, always worried. Then God said, "The attached man carries heavy stones, thinking they are shields, but they are chains." In that moment, I realized how much my fear of losing was greater than my joy in having, and I thought, "But I worked hard for all of this." And then God said, "There's nothing wrong with achieving. The problem is believing that your identity depends on what you have. You are not what you own." And then, with immense gentleness, he said, "You are what remains. When everything you own is gone." That sentence was burned into me, like fire carved into my soul. You are what remains when everything you own is gone. And then God asked me, "Who are you, James, when you're alone, without your businesses, without your titles, without your body, without anything?" And I didn't know how to answer. Then he said, "That's why you suffer, because you built your identity on fragile, fleeting, changing foundations." And I asked, "What should I do?" And God replied, "Let go." And I asked, "Of everything?" And he said, "Let go of the belief that things define you. Let go of the fear of loss. Let go of the need to have, so you can finally just be." In that moment, I felt as if thousands of invisible chains were breaking all around me. It was like breathing, for the very first time. In that moment, I felt as if something very old within me was finally dying. And at the same time, something new was being born. It was strange, because there was no sadness in the loss, only relief. And then God said to me, "Now that you understand, you can choose. You can continue carrying your attachments and desires, or you can be free and walk lightly." I thought, "But what about my life? Everything I've built?" And then he said, "You can keep it all. Just don't let any of it own you." And that was one of the most important things I learned in that moment. It's not about not having, it's about not being a slave to what you have. Then God showed me an image. Myself, walking barefoot along a road, empty-handed, but with my chest open, light, smiling. And he said, "This is how I want you to walk, without the weight of what you don't need, without the illusion that you have to carry everything." I cried. Again. But this time, it wasn't a cry of pain. It was a cry of relief. And then God said, "James, you didn't come into this world to accumulate, but to express who you are." In that moment, I understood what he meant. I hadn't realized it, but my entire life had been built around achievements, status, recognition, trying to prove to myself and to others that I was someone important. But there, before him, I saw that none of it truly mattered. God said, "Your worth doesn't lie in what you do, but in who you are." And then, as if he wanted to make sure I would never forget, he said, "You are loved, not for what you have, but simply because you exist." Those words completely broke me. I had spent my whole life trying to earn love, trying to be recognized, accepted, admired. But there, in that eternal space, God told me that I was already loved unconditionally, without having to prove a single thing. And then, like a father welcoming his child, he said, "Rest now, James. You don't need to fight to be anymore." In that moment, I felt a peace so deep, so absolute, that I thought maybe I was going to die right there. And honestly, I would have been okay with that. But then God said, "It's not your time yet." I didn't need to ask. I already knew. And then he said, "Go back and live. But live lightly, live freely, live consciously." And then the light began to fade, slowly. And I heard one last time, "Remember, you are not what you possess, not what you desire. You are what remains when all else fades." And suddenly, I opened my eyes. I was back in the room at the inn. The ceiling was there, the bed, the silence. But I was no longer the same. I lay there, motionless, my heart pounding. While those words still echoed inside me, "You are not what you possess. You are what remains." I don't know how long I stayed there, but when I finally got up, I looked out the window, and for the first time in a very, very long time, I simply breathed deeply, and I smiled. That day, I decided to change. I chose to live more simply, more presently. I sold some things, gave others away, but more important than what I left behind was what I embraced: freedom. Freedom from needing to prove anything to anyone. Freedom from clinging to what I have or what I want. I began to cultivate silence, meditation, prayer, and every time the old impulse returned, that urge to buy something new, to chase fleeting pleasure, to prove I was someone, I would stop, breathe, and remember, "You are what remains when all else fades." That phrase became my mantra, and somehow, I was never the same again. Life went on, of course. I still work, still have projects, still have friends. But inside me, there is a lightness, a peace that I never even knew was possible, and all of it because that night, I had the chance to meet God, or rather, to be found by Him, and He taught me, in the deepest, truest way, that lust is an emptiness disguised as desire, that attachment is a prison disguised as protection, and that, in the end, only love, only awareness, only being remain today. Every time I look in the mirror, I no longer see that anxious man, thirsty, starving. I see a man, simply at peace. And if I could, leave you with just one thing. If you're listening to me now, it would be this: you are not what you have, or what you desire. You are what remains. When everything else fades away, never forget that.